If God is all loving, then they wouldn't send people to hell for eternity for decisions that they made in a finite lifetime. If you think this, you might be surprised that a lot of Christians agree with you and have from the very beginning of Christianity. Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. So the popular notion is that all Christians sort of believe the same things when it comes to hell and the afterlife and punishment and all of that. And, the popular understanding is that Christians believe that if you aren't a Christian and if you make certain mistakes, that God will send you to hell to burn for forever for the mistakes and the decisions that you made in this lifetime. But there is a wide range of belief on that issue today and since the beginning of Christianity. Let's talk about the popular way that people thought about this at the very beginning of Christianity. Now, remember, Christianity, when it began, was not a huge cultural force. You would have a city with like 100,000 people that lived in it and like 20 Christians. And if those Christians believed that everybody else in that city was going to burn for forever, then this God that they were talking about, who is a God of grace and love and all of that, would not be graceful or loving or any of that. Now, don't get me wrong. Early Christians were trying to get people to choose to follow the teachings of Jesus. That definitely was their thing. But the way that worked out practically was bound up with two ideas. The first one is that choice was not limited by anything, including death. That people were able to choose to follow Jesus in this life, and that choice extended all the way into the afterlife. The second thing was something that is called general revelation. You'll find it in places like the first chapter in the book of Romans, where it says that God has been speaking to everyone for forever through what God has made, that God has revealed God's self through creation. And so people have heard the voice of God and have been able to make the choice to follow God from that amount of revelation and understanding. And it appears that viewpoint was something that was sort of the most popular viewpoint for a long, long time in Christianity. In modern Christianity, there are other ways that people think of it. One of the ways that people think of like what happens in the afterlife is that this idea that when Jesus died, Jesus dealt with whatever goes on in the afterlife. And that Jesus' life and death and resurrection provides for whatever is needed for every single person to be able to spend eternity with God. And so this is actually what these people will say is that this is a belief that God is the most powerful that God can be, that the power of God to bring people to heaven is not limited by anything, including human choice. And then the response will be, well, if that's the case, if heaven is not just a reward for the people who choose to follow Jesus, then why even choose to follow Jesus? Well, that's because the life and teachings of Jesus are actually things that can make your life and the world a better place if you follow them, regardless of what happens when you die as a result of following them. Right? That those teachings are valid and useful in this world right now and have benefits all on their own. There's also this view that when people die, if they have not lived the life that they need, that they're actually going to have a time to deal with that, to work that out in the afterlife before they get to go to heaven. That's another view. And then there's the Christians that say, you know what? We actually don't know. When you look at the Bible, it is not clear. It doesn't say very much at all about what's going to happen when you die. And they'll point to the fact that the Bible says almost nothing really about hell and very little about heaven. And it appears that the people like Jesus who are teaching in the Bible are not very concerned about what happens after you die, that they are very much focused on what happens here and now. And now there are a lot of different views, like I said, and there are nuanced versions of each of those views that kind of change different particularities about them. But it is really important for everyone to know that even though the popular notion is that all Christians agree on this, that's just not the case. And if you say like, well, I couldn't support a religion where the God sends almost everybody throughout history, billions and millions of people, to burn forever because they just didn't know anything, they didn't know about Jesus, or because they didn't choose that because they had some sort of trauma or other religious upbringing from their family, well, that's not Christianity. That's not what absolutely everyone that is a Christian believes. And in fact, the majority of Christians believe something else entirely. Here's a shocking stat. That more conservative evangelical view of Christianity, those streams of Christianity don't represent the majority of Christians in the world. In fact, the estimation is that that's really just about 30% of Christians in the world.